Sonic the Hedgehog took the world by storm in the 90s as a platforming hero with style and attitude. With all his mainline games from 1991 to 2001 being financially successful and positively received, I don't think anyone imagined that the franchise would fall into the hole of inconsistency that it's still in today, and that even fans would have feelings of ambivalence towards many of its games. Yet, though he seemingly doesn't have the budget of other top performers, Sonic is still incredibly popular and now has his own thriving movie franchise. As for his games, Sonic is still a platformer at its core, but how much each game focuses on that differs, and how frequently and wildly gameplay elements shift and change in the series is staggering compared to a rock like Mario. We've gotten some mostly agreed upon good games and bad games since 2001, but for the most part, the reception of Sonic games has been divisive. And a great example of that is Sonic Unleashed, a game that was loved by many, hated by many, and tolerated by many at release. In recent years, Unleashed has grown in popularity. Praise for it is common, and dialogue regarding it leans more positive. So, knowing that it's a favorite of many Sonic fans, I thought I'd beat it and see if the affection it's garnered in the public eye is warranted, or if the opinions back in 2008 weren't negative simply because of the frustration with what came 2 years before. Hello, welcome to H7 Bus. My name is Nathaniel Welch and this is Video Game Previewer. In this video, we'll be talking about Sonic Unleashed, which I played on the Xbox Series X. Sonic Unleashed was primarily designed for 7th gen consoles, but due to the power discrepancy between the PS3, Xbox 360, and the weaker Wii, a secondary version of the game was created for the Wii that was also ported to the PS2, making Sonic Unleashed a multi-gen game. If you're looking to play the HD version, I think the Series X is the way to go. There was a recent fan port to PC, but I don't know all the details around that, so whatever you go with, keep it legal, folks. Why would you play the HD version though? The SD version is the better version of the game. Let's go. The game opens in space, in orbit around the Earth. Sonic the Hedgehog, the fastest thing alive, lands on the deck of one of his archenemy, Dr. Eggman's ships. In an epic sequence, Sonic wrecks Eggman's fleet and has Eggman at his mercy. But, unawares to Sonic, Eggman had actually lured him into a trap. He restrains Sonic and drains the Chaos Emeralds that are superpowering him of their energy. Eggman then uses that energy to shoot a beam into the center of the Earth, cracking the planet into 7 pieces and awakening a mythical beast named Dark Gaia. Because of this, Sonic is turned into a werehog and Eggman ejects him back down to Earth. Sonic wakes up after re-entry, having been mysteriously protected by a force shield. He falls into a small creature who eventually goes by Chip, who seems to have lost his memory. Together, Chip and Sonic go on a quest to restore Chip's memory, recharge the Chaos Emeralds, repair the Earth, cure Sonic, and stop Eggman and Dark Gaia from taking over the world. It's a pretty cool story, and actually makes a little more sense than it sounds when you write it out like that. Why Sonic turns into a werehog is obviously initially very confusing. You're left wondering if the writers were just huge fans of Zelda Twilight Princess, and it's not plainly explained in the game, though apparently it is in the original manual, but you can kind of figure it out with context clues. Anyway, it's clear that Unleashed was meant to have a story with a lot of scale that brought a lot of new ideas to the franchise, and it stays fairly interesting. Development for Sonic Unleashed started in 2006 on Sonic Team's proprietary engine they began developing in 2005, the Hedgehog engine, an updated version of which is still being used today. Sonic Team wanted to innovate the series' 3D gameplay while also maintaining its identity, keeping Sonic and the feeling of playing one of his games recognizable. The concept of the werehog came out of desire for there to be contrast to Sonic's high-speed gameplay, but rather than add another character, the team decided to give Sonic a crazy power instead. Thus on paper, Sonic would stay a platformer, but one half of Unleashed would feature high-speed gameplay, while the other would possess a combat system. It was known that both the idea of the werehog and the decision to make Sonic the only playable character would be met with a critical eye, but there was hope that both choices would end up being received with praise and understanding. Sonic Unleashed was released on November 18, 2008 to mixed reception. On Metacritic, the HD version of the game scored a 60 out of 100 on the Xbox 360, while the PS3 version received a 54 out of 100. The game's graphics, soundtrack, and daytime gameplay would be heavily praised, while the gameplay style and balance, overall quality of the platforming, responsiveness of the controls, and pacing of the werehog levels would be heavily criticized and seen as poor. The difference in score between the two platforms would mostly be due to the PS3 having a less stable frame rate and seemingly containing more bugs. Sonic Unleashed's SD version ended up with a 66 out of 100 on Metacritic, and was also praised for the graphical quality achieved on its respective platforms. The controls, responsiveness, and daytime level design in the SD version was said to be an improvement over its higher res counterpart. And while some of the game's qualities would be seen as equivalent to or lesser than the HD versions, it'd in general be seen as the better edition of the game, which is reflected in the higher score. I first played Sonic Unleashed on the PS2 as a kid, and I loved it. Eventually something happened to the disc, I don't remember what exactly, but I did not forget my fondness for the game, and I ended up buying it again sometime later. I loved the different levels, exploring the Gaia temples, the combat, the music, the story, the opening, and the chill vibe that came with Sonic's high speed levels, though what he was doing seemed pretty intense. I never beat the game, I couldn't get through the final level. When I was older and better at video games though, instead of picking the PS2 version back up and finishing what I started, I went ahead and purchased the PS3 version. I didn't know the gameplay would be any different. I just expected it to have better graphics and maybe some extra features, but I was pleasantly surprised with the new game at first. Getting to actually explore the town Sonic was visiting rather than just see an overview of them was awesome. But the PS3's low frame rate drove me nuts because it made me feel like I couldn't actually see what was going on during the day stages. That, mixed with stages' metal requirements, is what turned me off from the game. Now, probably 8 or 9 years later, I got an Xbox Series X and knew that this time I'd enjoyed the game. So I played through it, fully intending to review it for the show, curious to see what the modern hype around the game was about. And while it's clearly many people's favorite Sonic game, it's not mine. I didn't have a very good time. The rose-colored image I have of the PS2 version in my head, which I should refresh eventually, that used to compete with Sonic Mania for the title of my favorite Sonic game, did not save the experience for me, and my expectations led to my disappointment. But I do feel like I better understand Unleashed now, and there are things I appreciate about it that I wasn't aware of before, or didn't see in it before. So, while it's not my favorite Sonic game, and you'll learn why over the course of this review, I tried my best to give it a fair shake, and I want to share my thoughts with you. Sonic Unleashed's presentation is incredible. All that work on the Hedgehog engine clearly paid off here because the game looks great, and that's why it ran like trash on 7th gen hardware. It's great to have it now on a console that can actually run it at 60 FPS, because graphically, everything still holds up well. It could use a good bit of anti-aliasing, but the lighting is still superb, texture resolution is also very clear considering its age, everything is so detailed. It does do that PS3 depth of field thing, you won't have trouble seeing anything, but like you'd expect, it's a little overused, but not egregiously, except in a specific type of level that we'll discuss later. Because you're literally traveling the world throughout the game, you get to see different peoples, places, and environments. And Sonic Team did a great job at making everywhere distinct and memorable. If you know your geography, you can pretty easily tell where each area is inspired from. Some of them are so interesting and beautiful as well, that you may find yourself wishing you could go there. It's clear that the devs were trying to make something new and grand with this game, and I think the design of the HUDs, menus, and loading screens reflect that well. They're sleek, readable, and modern. Additionally, subtitles have good visibility, and so do any pop-ups and effects. Effects don't get in the way, and pop-ups aren't difficult to see, which is important when you're moving as fast as you do. Sonic Unleashed has a style all its own, but it's still so very Sonic. Less 90s cool and more late aughts professional, but I find it somehow works. The game's animations are fairly good too. Some of them do look odd and a little rough, but overall I'd say they're of good quality. Seeing Sonic's quills shift as his speed increases and his arms stretch as he does his best Kratos impression feels awesome. However, though the animations may be okay, and the attempt at giving you, the player, visual feedback is so very appreciated, the game has some hitbox, hurtbox, and collision issues, which the quality of the gameplay obviously suffers because of. To not immediately get too negative, let's talk about the cutscenes. I swear they could have just made a movie. The ones rendered in an engine look good because the game looks good, though I think some of the cutscene exclusive locations were shown noticeably lack personality compared to those featured in the areas you visit. But the pre-rendered cutscenes, dude? Oh my goodness. Forget the live-action CGI crossover of the Sonic movies. I want Sega to spend Spirits Within type money on a full CGI Sonic movie. Get the current voice cast from the games, and whoever it was that designed Unleashed's cutscenes in the opening of Shadow the Hedgehog, and give me the edgy 2000s back. But yeah, the opening looks great. You've already seen it, and I'm sure you agree. Though the gameplay featured in Sonic games are of erratic quality, the music is always excellent. That's the one thing we can all agree on with Sonic. Everyone has their own opinions of each game, but at least the music's always great. And Sonic Unleashed might just have the best soundtrack in the series. It's not my number one, but it is in the running for it. It's up there. There's so much variety, and I like it all. Even the Werehog battle theme, which I never got tired of. I love jazz. You've got relaxing tracks, spooky tracks, bombastic tracks, epic tracks, bossa nova, jazz, rock, and the lead singer of Bowling for Soup killing it with the main theme. And the way regional instrumentation is integrated into different tracks is just so neat. Bottom line, the soundtrack is good, and you should listen to it even if you've never played a Sonic game before. And sneak in this possibility into a playlist of yours, please. The sound design overall is good. Balance is fine, important noises cut through the bumping tracks, and I enjoy the voice acting. Now, it's got some weird moments and times where line delivery feels a little forced or cheesy. It's weird because the game has some pretty serious themes, and yet this is the start of where Sonic began to become more kid-friendly again, which means the tone takes some getting used to. But the reason I enjoy the voice acting so much is because the actors in this game are the set of them featured from 2005 to 2010. Commonly known as the 4Kids cast, these are the actors that did the English dub of Sonic X, which I grew up watching. Add in an absurd amount of time spent playing Sonic Riders 1 and Zero Gravity, along with Sonic and the Black Knight, and to this day my ears still acknowledge them all as the definitive voices for the characters. I do really like the nowadays modern cast though, I just have less nostalgia for them. Altogether, for Unleashed being such a divisive game, I don't think many people get hung up on the visual and audio part of the experience. It's too good, in my opinion, for how flawed the game is. There's so much charm and so much that's likable, and it makes it hard to dislike the game, even if playing it isn't very fun. Let's talk about that. On paper, Sonic Unleashed is full of really good ideas. Making Sonic go faster than ever before through high energy reaction based platforming meant to make you feel like Sonic is a great idea. On paper. The biggest problem I have with the introduction of the boost gameplay here is that Sonic goes too fast. Even with the Series X's high frame rate, I constantly felt like I couldn't see where I was going when running in day stages. It sucks to not be able to tell what's ahead of you in a game where you're supposed to be going fast. And in a game this pretty too, I want to enjoy the locales. And unless you stop running, you're not really given the opportunity to do that. The daytime level design is also only okay too. I'll give the game some grace, this is the first mainline boost game. Sonic Generations was able to learn from it, and that's why that game is so good. Yet, here in Unleashed, some levels are just balanced so poorly. Some embrace platforming too much, which I love 2D Sonic games, but Sonic does not handle well at all here. Controls are not tight, and he's so fast that rarely does anything feel consistent. You'll get better at it eventually, but this version of Sonic just does not platform well. Other levels are too automated. The game is at its best when you're not going too fast, which is why I never upgraded my speed level. You're platforming in small bursts and constantly having to react fast and slide or perform a quick time event. Automation, though, is my main problem with this type of Sonic gameplay. There were levels I felt like I could just boost through and barely have to jump or turn, and that's frustrating. I want to see the world. I like Sonic, I want to play as him, but why am I just watching him run? That's what made playing as Sonic in the adventure games and speed types in Heroes so good, is that the devs balanced and translated the sense of speed, spectacle, and platforming elements of 2D Sonic into 3D really well. Where those games stumbled was with the other gameplay styles, which leads me to my next point. Keeping Sonic as the sole playable character in order to focus the story and create good quality gameplay rather than high quantities of it is a good idea in general. The problem is that Unleashed clearly needed more time and resources available in the kitchen in order to deliver us a nice product. It lacks polish and feels so unfocused at times, which is the opposite of what Sonic Team was going for. It's got great gameplay ideas and concepts that would have worked better for me if they had been cleaned up a little bit. Fix Sonic's platforming, fix enemy hitboxes, fix the controls, and make medal collecting less important. I know it pads out the gameplay, and I was going to collect most of them anyway, but having to have as many as you need seriously shouldn't be mandatory. The present boss fights clearly needed more time as well. Day Sonics are basically all the same, and they're fun, but one of them that they try to spice up, they did so by just making it more punishing rather than more challenging. The Werehog bosses have variety and are okay, I still had fun with them, but one of them is just so lazy. Less poorly designed and more just lazy. The game needed more time. Having the Werehog as a pace change and gameplay mix up to Sonic speed was a good idea. On paper. His levels are long, like a half hour on average, and that wouldn't be a bad thing if the levels weren't only 3 minutes. Like, the rhythm of the gameplay and story is passable, but why was there a time I had 80 minutes of Werehog gameplay ahead of me after having run fast for 4? I did enjoy playing as the Werehog more than High Speed Sonic, but that's because it was a decent hack and slash with decent platforming, a decent combo system, and a decently designed difficulty curve, featuring poor hitboxes, infrequent checkpoints, enough jawbreaking to make Link jealous, yet great music. I enjoyed it because I could just chill, look for some medals, and only kind of try to punch evil creatures. Sonic's punches and slashes don't always register when they should, and I think it's both a hitbox and hurtbox problem, which just makes the game feel unresponsive. Unleashed also has this lock-on system critical to the Werehog's grabs and platforming, as well as non-like in Sonic's homing attacks. Sometimes it just doesn't activate and lock on. With the Werehog, you can easily develop a feeling for it and learn how to leap of faith into its activation, but if it doesn't activate for Speedy Modern Man, you're doomed. Then there's the medals. You have to collect what are called Sun and Moon medals throughout both types of stages. If you don't, you'll eventually come up against a wall and will be unable to progress the story until you do. For the Werehog, this is fine. They're not too hard to find, and I didn't find them boring to look for. However, for the day stages, you have to slow down so much at times in order to get them. Slow down is exactly what I want Boost Sonic to do, but the levels just aren't designed for that. Yet, there is one level where everything works and comes together. I won't spoil too much, but it's called Eggman Land, and it's the final zone of the game. It's a 40-minute level where you switch between both versions of Sonic multiple times. It's perfectly challenging and difficult. Slogging through the game is almost worth it just to play this level. The music is tight, there's no medals to find, and the Werehog platforming and encounters are super well designed. The trials you'll face force Day Sonic to slow down, but it doesn't suck. It's all fun, intense, and reactive. Eggman Land is the perfect example of what the end of a game should look like. It brings back every mechanic in one awesome gauntlet made to test your skills. The boss fight afterwards is great as well, but sadly, that's not the end. I extremely dislike the final boss section of the game. It's full of unfairness, RNG, and great cinematics that fail to be cinematic since they're so chopped up and because no one knows what a J-cut is. The first part of the final boss fight is unfun. I would have rather had it be a cutscene. And while the second part is actually fairly fun, it's too short and it overuses QuickTime events, so I'd again rather it have been a cutscene. Ending the game with the best level and best boss fight instead of with this other stuff would have been fine. Eggman Land is the best part of the game. The final boss isn't good, but the worst part of the game has to do with Tails. Designing a short arcadey minigame of Tails and Sonic flying on the tornado as a way to give you some extra content that is simple and easy to do is an okay idea on paper. The flying levels weren't in the SD version because if they were, I never would have liked the game. To start, the depth of field is all messed up and it makes it look like the horizon is covered in Vaseline, which is weird, but I can get over it. You're left with an undercooked minigame that I could almost compare to a rhythm game, but without the rhythm. Enemy placement is horrible. It goes on way too long, and every attempt it makes at having spectacle falls flat. It's frustrating and feels like a waste of time. I just wanted to get back to the other gameplay. Giving you access to the very land Sonic is traveling between, and letting you know its residents and culture is a great idea. On paper. Yet in reality, while it's cool to see everything and talk to people, nobody really knows anything. And the last thing I want to do when gameplay starved and invested in your story is talk to some random people and get lost in an alley, rather than watching a cutscene or something. The hub world elements really hurt this game. It could have been so much better with a pace and focus resembling SA2. In the SD version of the game, there was no hub worlds, and instead you interacted with a JPEG. I'd honestly take the JPEG, especially since the hub world part of the game that the SD version did have involved you going in these places called Gaia temples, which are a huge part of the story, yet you don't go in them in the HD version. It feels like it should be the other way around. Creating lore and desiring to tell an epic and in-depth story with all the talent and ideas they had working for this game is a great idea. On paper, man, I really like the story. I actually love it. But I just really think they should have focused on it more. Explain some things. Give me more lore. Keep up the funny writing and fast sandwich eating, and expand your narrative to actually fit the huge game you're trying to make and the huge story you were trying to tell with it. It ends up being enjoyable anyway, but the ending is paced so poorly, and besides the beginning, Unleashed doesn't really work to keep you invested or engaged. It had really great characters, but they're so underutilized. Amy could have been featured more. Chip could have actually been dejected because of his lost memory. Eggman should have been more present considering what he actually accomplishes in the game, and I would have loved to see more Tails, but I understand the game was trying to focus on Sonic more. I think that was a mistake though. In a perfect world, Sonic Unleashed probably still would have been called World Adventure, and would feature Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The stuff at the beginning would have still happened, though it probably would have been Team Sonic rather than just Mr. Hedgehog flying solo. And there would be no Werehog. The trio would get launched down to Earth, would meet Chip, and would embark on an epic quest to, yes, restore Chip's memories and repair the world, but they'd also learn more about Dark Gaia and actually be mad at Eggman for what he's done. Amy would actually be in the game for a reason. Professor Pickle would be more involved in the story and the direction of the journey, and we'd get to enjoy the dynamic between Sonic, Tails, Chip, and Knuckles as they explore the world. The boost mechanic would stand, but it'd act more as a burst, like in Sonic Unleashed's SD version and Sonic Rush. Sonic would also control better, since they would have taken more time to polish this version of the game and its mechanics. There'd be a tornado mission every time the team travels to a new area, except the minigame would be more like a bullet hell, switching from a behind-the-back perspective like in the first Sonic adventure to a top-down view like in Gradius or something throughout the fight. Knuckles would fill the role of the Werehog. Collecting stuff fits him better anyway, so Sun and Moon medals would be awarded to the player depending on the rank they got on a Sonic stage, while they would have gotten rid of the ranks in time for the Knuckles levels, keeping the collectible medals in. He wouldn't have a run button, he'd just overall move faster. The fighting and combo systems would stay in the game, and Knuckles' glide would have been incorporated into the platforming, which could totally speed up the levels and balance out the gameplay more. The hitboxes and collision would be fixed too. The XP system would also see more use between the three characters, as the tornado could be upgraded to shoot better or to have more health. If going with hub worlds, not only would we be able to explore more fleshed out main hubs, but the level select areas would actually be in Gaia temples again. Sonic Heroes 2, Sonic Adventure 3, Sonic World Adventure, whatever you want to call it, I would have rather had that. But that's not what we got. Sonic Unleashed is a game with a good opening that does a good job at tutorializing you, even if it holds your hand a little too much. It's a memorable but undertold story delivered with well-aged graphics and incredible pre-rendered cutscenes. That all is to complement and facilitate gameplay that can be thoroughly and legitimately enjoyed by a niche audience. But it's not for everyone. It's got a wonderfully alive and fleshed out world accompanied by excellent music, and while that serves the game in grabbing and engaging you at the start, you may find yourself wanting to stop holding on. It's cool what the game tells us about Sonic's characterization. He obviously loves to help people and never hesitates to do so, but he gets self-conscious about his image as the werehog. Something I would have never expected from Mr. Confident the Hedgehog. But eventually, Sonic comes to realize that people love and appreciate him for his heart, what he does, and who he is, not what he looks like. So, the lesson here is, be yourself. Be who God made you to be, and try your best to not obsess over what others think about you. Easier said than done, but imperative nonetheless. There's a lot of generosity going around in this game too, and it usually always helps someone out. There's joy to be found in helping people and giving without thought of reward, and it's cool how this game subtly shows that beyond the normal, do the right thing, do good, and keep a great attitude lesson carried by many kids' games and 3D platformers. Back to the idea of being yourself, that's an idea Unleashed took to heart. It's bold with many of its choices, and I absolutely applaud it for that. It's an odd combo of gameplay styles and story concepts that certainly resonates with many gamers and Sonic fans. It's not my favorite Sonic game like it may be yours, but I'm glad I played it. I finally wrapped up that thread from my childhood and got to go on an adventure with Sonic and Chip that made me feel like a kid again, even if at times it was a frustrated and confused kid. Unleashed is a curious thing, for sure. Sonic Unleashed is not a bad game by any means, but a lot of it can be unfun. And when you stop having fun with a game, is continuing play really worth it? If you love and enjoy most of Unleashed, I can see why, but for me there's just a whole lot of mid here. I felt like I needed to play Unleashed, but in the aftermath, I'm left a little frustrated and a little unsatisfied, but the game was still more fun than unfun. So, should you play it? No. I think your money is best spent on other things, yet if you can get it cheap on sale for like $5, or you really like Boost Sonic gameplay and think you'll enjoy hack and slash medal collecting, then go for it. However, if you're a huge Sonic fan who hasn't experienced Unleashed and you think you'll share in some of my frustrations, either pick up the Wii version, which you can play with a controller, or watch one of those cutscene movies on YouTube. I wanted to like this game, but I really just don't. So, trying to be as objective as possible, I give Sonic Unleashed a 6 out of 10. I'll play the Wii version eventually. Let's hope it fares better. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more video game previewers, then you should like and subscribe, because there'll always be more on the way. What do you think about Sonic Unleashed? Let me know in the comments. Nicely, please. God bless.